Okay, this is Go Gently. This is my first time. I'd like to introduce you to Masaru Nogi. He's the head of global business development with Gumi. Martina Welkhoff, who's a serial entrepreneur, working with ConveneVR, which is a mixed AR and virtual reality social platform. She's also exited and is working with venture capitalists as well, I understand. And Marco DeMiroz, who requires very little introduction since he seems to know everyone, who is the general partner currently with his own fund. And we're going to get started in talking about VR opportunities for gaming.
Perfect.
Right, and there will also be an opportunity for Q&A, but this is such a small and intimate room, so if you want to ask a question, just come on up and we'll break. So one of the things, I guess, that I really wanted to ask you guys is because Casual Connect is such a mixed group of game makers from casual, mobile to VR. What makes you more excited about investing in VR for gaming?
So maybe I should do introduction a little bit. So I'm Nogi from Gumi, and then Gumi is one of the top mobile gaming developer based in Japan. But we are public, and we have 700 employees, and then we have several studios all over the world. And then mobile gaming side, we are very profitable, very successful. But Gumi is now heavily involved in AR VR space. And then we joined our Marco's fund, early stage, and we also established incubation acceleration program, Tokyo, Seoul, and Helsinki. And then we incubate startups, VR startups. And Gumi ourselves also directly invest, especially VR gaming companies. And then we recently invested 2 companies. One is a company called PlaySnack, Berlin, Germany-based company. And their co-founder is ex-Crytek, and they make game called a Crime, maybe as you guys know. And then they spin out, and then we invest in them. And then another company we invested, a company called In Exile Entertainment, and then they provide a game called Mage's Tale. It's actually currently #1 in Oculus store. So, and I personally visited more than 20 countries to see the AR VR space. That's why I think I can talk about what's going on each regions in the AR VR space. And then regarding to your answer to the question, so I've been attending Casual Connect, and it's actually before it's more like a mobile gaming event, and then still there are so many mobile analytics advertisement companies here, and there's mobile gaming company, but luckily, people started more like AR, VR gaming business. And my personal goal is, as a gaming company, we always looking for new gaming company. That's, yeah. And then I met some good companies this time as well. Yeah.
So you think, like, if you're still making mobile, casual, non-AR, VR, do you see an opportunity for studios like that to be raising money right now?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because people said the market, AR, VR market expansion is actually not rapid as we expected, but still, Facebook committed 200 million and total 500 million investment to the contents, and also Oculus just announced standalone or cheaper devices, and then the market is getting more better and ready. Yeah. That's why contents developers should just start making the VR stuff.
Marco, what advice would you have to someone who's making the leap from mobile to AR VR? Because you've been like Diner Dash, you've been cross-platform on both sides of that table. If someone's looking to make the change, what advice do you have for them right now?
I would say experiment, because coming from mobile gaming background, we've seen very talented PC, console, game designers had a hard time transitioning to mobile. It was a different, asset, different, resources, different form factors, and then combine that with the freemium model. It really took us as an industry a long time to really master that, right? So, and on the VR, when I say VR, I really should include AR. For us, VR, AR, MR, XR would be sort of like the, combined. It takes a while to learn a spherical experience because we've been really living in a rectangular environment all of our lives. And I see a lot of first-person shooters in VR So we have two questions. Advice maybe in a formal question. First one, why do you have to do this in VR? Because there has to be a compelling reason, right? If I'm just shooting 24/7, I don't really enjoy the beauty of VR. It has to be an amazing VR experience. Second is, and sort of going back to it, why do you have to do VR? Second, is it really fun? Which is fundamental to any gameplay. But really start with the first one. If you don't have to have a compelling reason to express the user experience or create an amazing environment and really wow people, you shouldn't do it in VR. And it's going to take a while to learn that.
Martina, for those in the audience who may not know, because you laughed when he said XR, maybe you want to tell people what you see that meaning of that particularly, and what drew you specifically to ConveneVR.
Sure, yeah. So I chuckled because we have these conversations about the semantics around all this all the time. And the industry being what it is in this early state, the names people are using, the sort of taxonomy that we have is changing all the time. And so one of the funds that I'm working on is Women in XR, and we chose XR because we are investing in women-led companies in AR, VR, and MR, and so XR is kind of the catch-all category for that. But not a lot of people necessarily understand or know that shorthand, and so it's just interesting. It's led to some interesting messaging challenges that we're working through. But what drew me into the space was first and foremost the technology itself. I was my first company was in mobile games when I exited that last year. Thinking about what I was going to do next, a couple of close friends of mine had just started VR companies, and I said, hey, come check out this Vive, look at what we're doing. And I was just blown away. I mean, it really exceeded my expectations. And I saw an opportunity to get involved with something really from the ground up. I mean, the technology's been around for a while, but I think this is a critical point in terms of the industry developing, and I wanted to be a part of influencing what that looked like, both from the industry perspective of what's the culture around VR, what's the, what are people who are looking at VR from the outside seeing in terms of what the industry represents, and also the technology itself. What do the products look like? What do the experiences look like? And so I saw that as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to jump in and hit the ground running in a place like Seattle where there's such a strong community. And I found it relatively easy to step into that community and start learning and start experimenting, like Marco said, and just seeing what sticks and what doesn't. And we're very much, with Convene, we're very much still in that experimental mode and probably will be for quite a while. I think I was humbled early on when I thought we'd be, shipping product by now. When we started in January, I had a pretty aggressive timeline mapped out, and I soon realized we had a lot more to learn, and I wanted to take my time being thoughtful and gathering the data and making sure that we were really building the product that would ultimately best serve our user base. So.
Thank you. So you brought up women, and it was very interesting. Marco and I were kind of having a back and forth on the topic of gender disparity in financing, and he pointed out 7% of financing goes to women, and there's a lot of bad news all the time, which I think can sometimes be harmful as well because it makes women more hesitant to go into these sectors. And Marco told me a little bit about what you two are working on in order to improve that, and I'd love to hear from both of you about how you approach that, and Nogi, you as well, at what you're doing on your side.
I'll take a shot at it. So, looking at the numbers, 7% or less going to women entrepreneurs. One of our early observation was in VR or in XR, and a lot of creative forces were coming from women, yet the funding wasn't really going to them. So there's a stark disparity. If you look at across the whole XR ecosystem, including 360 videos and production and everything else, and new technology coming out, there are a lot of women entrepreneurs. There are a lot of startups starting with, either led or co-led by women, but the funding wasn't really reflecting that. So started talking to Martina, Melani, and Abby in LA. We thought we'll have to have a platform to really empower and enable them. There are a lot of great initiatives about women in tech, women in STEM, and others. This is very prosaic. The idea is to provide direct capital to companies co-led by women.
Yeah, and I think one really important piece of that is that we wanted to provide a beacon, essentially, where there's so much talent out there, and I think because some of the numbers and experiences women have can be so discouraging, sometimes women either don't start or they stop early because of those barriers. And so we wanted to be out there as a resource in terms of the capital and also community and a place where women could step in and know that they're going to have a positive experience, even if they don't necessarily get funding, but that it's a supportive and welcoming community, and that we have additional resources to offer beyond just the capital in terms of the mentorship and programming and opportunities just to refuel, in a sense. Like I raised money for my last company. I know that it can be profoundly discouraging and lonely for any founder, but I think in specific ways for women that are different. And so I think that's an equally important piece of this. Is just we called it in the beginning, and I think the website still says this. It says a movement in the making. I mean, it's a fund first and foremost, and really can become so much bigger than that over time.
I think that's great. Nogi, is there anything that you'd like to add to that, particularly that you guys are doing internally or in your partnerships?
We actually don't do particularly anything, but I personally ran the gaming studio before a couple of times, but still there are so many female talented people, especially artists, also some engineers and storytelling makers, So our investment standpoint, we actually don't care that we just want to looking for the quality and the very passion people, and if it's female, we just willingly just invest.
Yeah. Because VR is, or XR or XXR, whatever we decide on by the end of this talk, it's so emerging. How do you guys approach your due diligence when it comes to early stage startups in the space? And what tips do you have for anyone who's raising in that sector?
So from our perspective, we made 19 investments so far. Out of 19, 5 have been in gaming. So, and out of 5, 1 had an exit, Alchemy, which had a job simulator and Rick and Morty afterwards. And then we have actually 2 companies in Seattle, Against Gravity, which is the Rec Room, and Drifter Games, which just released Gunheart a few days ago, and then Rogue Initiative. So if you look at the portfolio of the companies we have in content and gaming space, there are several identifiers. One is we always like to see what they're thinking, because a lot of teams come to us, hey, I want to do this fantastic idea in VR, but we don't get a chance to see it. And what we learn over time is that you can be an awesome designer, again, PC, mobile, or console. Learning to express that in VR is real difficult. So a lot of times, great designers come to us and their first experiment doesn't look very good. So we always have to see something. So that's always a criteria for us. Even with Ray and others, we have to see some manifestation of their vision. Second part is having a team that is sort of lean and really it has a model that will stretch the dollars quite a bit. Just because we don't know the market adoption rate. We know it's going to be huge, but we don't know the rate of growth, and so they have to have some longevity. And the other part is having this this unique angle. Like when we heard from Alchemy, hey, we have a game in VR. We'll be in a cube and then we'll be drinking coffee, whatever. I mean, high level that doesn't sound very appealing. But they were amazing the way, the game mechanics worked and the progression model. It was super clever. And they made the most money last year. They made $3 million, again, for a VR game. That was huge. And Servio's made 2.7. So unique angles, so taking advantage of the medium to tell a very unique and fresh story. So we'd like to see a combination of that. In terms of monetization, we ignore all the revenue forecasts, to be honest with you, just because we don't know. We look at the OPEX. Do they have enough money to survive 18 to 24 months?
Peter Thiel said the mark of a very successful company was a very low-paid CEO. So that really goes into
a lot of our CEOs are extremely frugal, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I echo everything Marco said. And in addition, one of the things I look for in any company I'm doing diligence on, and I think is particularly true in the XR space, is how the founding team, I like to really get inside sort of the minds of the leadership as much as possible and get a sense of how they problem solve and just how they think about learning and growing, because I think the most important attribute in an early stage team is the ability to learn and adapt, because and only more so in XR than other spaces, because things are changing so quickly. There's so much we don't know, and most likely the assumptions of founders going in with about how users will respond to their product, what's going to be the most important feature, what ultimately will be the business model, a lot of those things are going to be wrong. And so, and I think about my own experience as an entrepreneur, and one of the things I learned in the hard way in my first company was I held on to some of those assumptions too long and ended up wasting time because I ignored signals because I was so attached to certain things I believed were going to be true. So I really look for, I spent a lot of time with founders that we're thinking about investing in, with each of the funds I'm part of, and just try to get a sense of how their ability to adapt and while still holding sort of that true north and vision for their team. It's a tricky balance, but I think the best founders, the best entrepreneurs hold that really well.
This is specifically for you, Nogi. A lot of people that I'm talking to are entrepreneurs are like, we're about to make the leap to Asia. Like, what a huge market. What are the pitfalls or mistakes that you see people moving their product from North America to Asia? And what advice would you have for anyone who's looking at trying to make or dip their toe into that market?
You mean entire Asian countries?
let's just say China and Korea.
China and Korea.
Yeah.
We had an office in China and Korea, but actually closed China. And so, yeah, you're true. As far as I talk with entrepreneur, Western countries, European and US countries, many people say, yeah, we're going to expand China. Easily they say that because it's so huge market. But as far as I experienced, actually it's so difficult. And because of that, it's not simply, it's, they have very different business culture. And also government is getting more strict with foreign companies, especially they make money in China. That's why you also have to make a very certain scheme how to do the business. One is that you definitely need a local partner. Because every time, even mobile gaming, if the market get bigger, then government say, hey, foreign company cannot publish, need a license, but actually only domestic company only can get the license. Means we have to find a local partner. But still, business custom is different. That's why it always have some sort of discrepancies, the difficulties. That's why one point is what depends on whether you can find right partner or not. This is a big one first.
So find the partner first in any of those markets.
But it's a little bit difficult, right? Whether you can trust them or not. Yeah.
In your opinion, do you think people have overestimated those values of those new markets?
Market itself is quite big. I think it's right, but it's difficult how to extend the business.
This is just a kind of a general question for anyone that is raising money right now in the space who is an entrepreneur. What do you wish that they knew about being a VC and investor from your side of the table?
To me, the hardest part is really to say no, because my partner and I, we've seen literally 3,000 VR, AR companies. We only invested in 19, maybe closing at number 20. So that means 99.7% of the time we say no. And both Tip10 and I, we've been on the other side. We've been, startup CEOs and entrepreneurs. It's really hard to raise money, and it's hard to be rejected. So, and that's really, to me, the hardest part, honestly, because a lot of great people come with incredible ideas. Some are too early, some are not a good fit for us. We don't necessarily get into hardware, and some of the game stuff, we want to see some early demos, and they don't have the money to do demo, but they're really good people. So saying no is, to me, the hardest part, just because we were almost like feel their pain. We've been on their side, and sort of did difficult fundraising. Beyond that, I think for us this is a journey, it's a partnership. Once we sort of invest in you, we don't want to create a financial structure to outsmart you. That's not our model. We're not trying to get transactional benefits. It's a journey. We want to really invest in the team and work with them for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years to create a great company.
Martina, you've been on both sides of the equation, having raised and now being one of the decision makers in whether or not someone's going to get any money. If you could go back in time, because you said it was a little soul crushing as an entrepreneur raising money, what would you tell yourself now knowing that VC side?
Well, I think certainly to take it less personally. I think I took those first rejections early on very personally. And there were many levels in which it was a humbling and growth opportunity kind of experience. But what I learned later on in that process, and now is being reinforced as I'm on the other side of the table, is these are really kind of long-term relationships and just human beings on both sides. And later on, as I was raising money, I actually sustained relationships with several VCs who had rejected us, but they gave really great feedback. We had a good rapport, and we sort of stayed in touch. And I'm actually talking to a couple of those about potentially syndicating deals now on the other side. So you never know how these relationships are going to evolve. And I guess not necessarily that I did this, but one of my top pieces of advice is, don't burn bridges. I've already had a couple of entrepreneurs I've had to decline the opportunity, kind of have some pretty strong emotional reactions with. On the one hand, I can certainly empathize with, but on the other hand, you have to just be really careful and realize that everyone's seeing a lot of deals. Everyone has different filters through which they're evaluating those. And most of the time, it's not. You shouldn't take it personally, and it's not. You should see it as an opportunity for growth and take the feedback that you get as another data point that you can use to become better and stronger. And so, I think play the long game. These are if you're going to stay in the industry, these are relationships that you'll likely have for decades, and so you want to make sure that you invest in keeping that rapport positive.
That's really true because as an entrepreneur, you have so much passion for what you're doing, and you talk to a VC, and whatever the reaction is, unfortunately, percentage basis more no than yes, right? And you take it personally, and we've been told several times that we're like clueless, and we didn't know what the heck we're doing, and it could very well be true, right? Because we don't really understand sometimes all the subtleties, and meetings tend to be very short. And but having playing the long game is really important, because once we like a person, we follow her to her next adventure. Sometimes first fundraising may not be fruitful, but we like the entrepreneur and the team. We like to work with them on a different platform. So I think having that long-term perspective and fostering a relationship is really important.
So all three of you have referenced relationships in one capacity or another, and there's a great quote, like, geography is destiny. A lot of entrepreneurs have a difficult time forming a relationship. Like, I come from nowhere, Canada, like really, really nowhere, Canada. What advice do you have for people who are perhaps outside of investment clusters? Or are you now seeing like a change where it sort of maybe doesn't matter where you're from? Do you think that it still matters where you're positioning yourself? Like, you have to be in the Valley or you have to be in Boston. Like, what areas are you guys seeing?
He travels a lot, he knows.
Yeah.
You're living out of a suitcase too.
Yeah, so each regions where I visited, they have startup communities. But I just find out just obvious things. Still, Silicon Valley is the biggest ecosystem, outstanding, big, so many investors, so many VCs, money is always going on. And then once, if the entrepreneur just fail, but it's easy to recover, those kind of ecosystem environments, the perfect. But other countries, especially for the AR/VR space, and when I first went to the European countries, there are so many VR startups, but they're very struggling for funding because the existing the investors are very conservative, but still their skill set is so high. That's why I focus then, and we established an incubation program kind of things. So, and then I went to the South America, Chile, and they don't know anything about AR/VR. I was so surprised. Their focus is still existing game, but after I talk and just explain what's going on in other countries, and then they just realize. And I always say, like, just being community is actually very important because, Marco, why we just work with Marco and Tipatati is they know local people. They're all talking underneath. And then which foreign companies never seen. And then when we have a meeting, hey, we decided to invest this company. What this company? We never know, but they know that because they're in a community. This is important. That's why location is not big deal, but the startup entrepreneurs should be in the right community Means
so find the ecosystem.
Then I suggested South American people come to GDC, come to big conference. Everyone is there. Then they communicate and then be in the right community and they find out opportunity to get money. That's what I always advise them.
So what are some of the most exciting cities that you've been to that you think are nailing that emerging VR ecosystem right now?
Ecosystem standpoint, it's actually difficult because Silicon Valley is so big and then compared to other countries, it's not easy. But skill set, quality-wise, I personally into more like Central Eastern European countries like Poland, Czech Republic, those countries. They used to be more closed, but right now they try to open the culture, also try to extend the business. And developers, especially engineer, artists, is very high quality. Maybe game called Super Hot VR. They are actually in Poland. I never known that. That's why I'm really excited to go there. I never been there. That's why I want to see that. Yeah. Even Czech Republic, artists, very high quality. Also engineers, very fast and then very accurate. Yeah.
What are you seeing on that, Marco?
So I'll sort of go back to our experience, and now we have enough data points. For us in North America, the hubs are Silicon Valley, LA, Seattle, and Austin. So really the top 4 destinations for us in terms of where entrepreneurs are coming from. Those are the top 4 areas. And Silicon Valley, just because it's Silicon Valley and there's a very established ecosystem of entrepreneurs and investors. And LA, this is, we've been talking about technology and content media merging. I think XR is really the true first opportunity. Not only, sort of providing a playing field for genders, but also for people coming from different backgrounds. So LA, we have most of our investments in Silicon Valley, next in LA, about 6 of them, and Seattle, 4, soon to be 5, perhaps, and then Austin too. So those are where the creative, activities are. I don't mean to say that they're not, great innovators coming from different locations. They don't have the visibility. They don't have this community leverage. Like, last deal came from Martina. She knew the entrepreneur, felt great about him, talked to them, and found a good fit. Having that community and ecosystem, having the ability to reach out to investors easily really helps. And then beyond those 4 cities in the US, and Canada is also very active because of the gaming community, and Nordic countries and Japan. So those are the primary regions for us.
So basically, if you don't live there, try and figure a way to have a presence.
Well, you know yourself. I mean, you tell us because you came from New Brunswick, and I had to look it up. Where is it in Canada? Whoa, it's all the way
I'm
out
from
there.
Saskatoon, by the way.
Oh,
so I
well, we were going to talk later. Commonwealth Unite. But yeah, it definitely is really hard when you're pitching to a completely different audience. The angel networks aren't there, and you're talking to someone for 2 months for $5,000. Yeah, it's definitely hard, I think, particularly for people in rural areas. But the promise of the web was you can be anywhere. And it definitely, relationships are still face-to-face. And so I think there's a lot of people that come to events like this that are based from all around the world. And while it might not matter where they're building the product, someone, like you said, has to be there to form the relationship.
Another challenge, again, really watching some of your experiences, my recommendation would be don't really spend a lot of time to build a business plan. Nobody reads business plans, at least not in the US. I know some of your investors were reading business plans. Yeah. And in Europe, unfortunately, business plans matter. And I know some of my friends are getting really nailed for their year 3 assumptions for marketing budget. Nobody really knows. So my recommendation in the US, at least, have a very solid 18-month plan. Because if you don't believe in the first 12 to 18 months, we're not going to believe the rest of it. Revenue projections don't have to be 100 million after year 3. Again, we ignore all of that. For us, what's important is have a very streamlined, very frugal plan to stretch the cash and raise enough money to last you, sort of 18 months ideally, just because you can survive the fluctuations in the market, and have a very aggressive product roadmap. It's aggressive but doable, so that you can go out there, learn, and most of our companies have a commercial release within 9 months after the investment. So the goal is for them to go out there, learn about the user behaviors, adjust from the funnel to the progression model and the game mechanics and everything else. So that's really what we look for.
So you guys have all talked about time too for experimentation and that being really important.
when someone is just getting started, how much money do you think, is reasonable at that early stage to give you that 10 months? Like, what's your average investment that you're seeing at that early stage?
Our average change, but we really sort of look at not our average, but what they need for 18 months, really. So the challenge is that you see a lot of companies, entrepreneurs come to you and say, hey, I need $300K for 9 months. So like, okay, that's really dangerous because, fundraising takes 3 to 4 months. So that means you have 4 months to deliver great returns or KPIs, and then you'll get on the road again to raise money for the following 4 months. So that short time period, it may seem expeditious, but it's really more difficult from VC perspective, because the team has to have enough runway to deliver certain milestones. So really, we invest based on the product roadmap. So the whole underwriting is based on the product roadmap. What do you have to do for the next 18 months so that by month, say 14, you have done enough to say, I'm ready for the next round of financing.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see some leeway in those numbers too. Like I've had people come to me with they're raising like $422,006 or whatever. They're so precise in their budgeting, and that there is absolutely no breathing room, and inevitably things take longer and cost more, unless you're really lucky, but oftentimes that's the case. And so I like to see that built in as well, that there's a little bit, that they're not counting down to the minute and dime that they'll need, that their runway will run out before.
Scope creep. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So whenever I see a number that's that precise, I get a little worried.
The one additional comments. So VR game investment. So market is of course expanding, but still top game sales is like a 3 million, 4 million, right? But still some companies say, well, I want to make a game. We need a $10 million US dollars. But why? I don't know when they can recoup, right? Yeah. Those kind of things. Sometimes developers say that.
Right.
Yeah.
We just got the hand wave, so we're totally open for questions. And if no one asks one, I'm going to think I was horrible at this. So
I just was curious about where you're placing your bets. There's hardware, platform, and content. Where do you see, where are you placing your money?
Right. Yeah. So it really depends on, each fund has different objectives and sort of expertise. By the way, if you go to the vrfund.com, you'll see the landscapes we publish for VR, AR, and also, not all global, for European. We're a $50 million fund, so we try to avoid hardware just because hardware tends to be capital intensive, and we feel like we're too small for it, just because, you need to have significant fundraising. It tends to be front-loaded for hardware. And so in general, we don't do hardware investments. And in terms of the rest of the landscape, we try to invest in areas in line with the market dynamics. What I mean by that is we don't want to get into long-term R&D projects. And we don't also want to get into what Nogi-san was saying. There's no market for funding a $10 million epic VR title, right? That's just no market for it. And a lot of times people come from, big game companies and saying, hey, we have this, team and we're awesome, which they are. We need, $8 to $12 million for this, great title. We're going to come out in 24 months. We're unable to predict what's going to happen in 24 months. So we tend to be looking at where the market is, how it's monetizing. As a result, a lot of our investments are in infrastructures and tools. Like Mindshow, you can do incredible user-generated content, or Limitless from Seattle, a character animation platform that's been adopted. And then we look at the content layer, because as you know, in an emerging technology platform like XR, you need to have compelling content, right? Otherwise, technology alone isn't sufficient. So we're looking at, again, Melani was asking, we're looking at those teams that have some manifestation of their vision, have a fresh idea to take advantage of this, incredible medium. So our investments tends to be, sort of as the market evolves, infrastructures and tools and content, and then in entertainment, location-based entertainment, and then later into apps for different verticals.
Thank you.
So you guys are very specific, investing in VR, AR, XR. So you probably have a better read of the market, but there seems to have been a kind of a hype on AR, VR investment over the last kind of 3 years. And it seems like a lot of traditional or generic VCs have kind of been chasing that angle. Do you kind of foresee a lot of either buyer's remorse on their parts because they were chasing a trend, or do you see them actually making smart investments?
Like the Me Too trend of basically like a traditional VC with perhaps no experience in VR who's like, oh, it's going to be huge and is doubling down. Do you see buyer's remorse and then potentially like a little bit of a bubble?
So I've had a lot of interesting conversations with VCs about this, and I think I have come across some, I don't know if I call it buyer's remorse, but I think there's just a lot of questions about timing right now. And I've talked to a couple of VCs who sort of the scenario you described probably put too much money in a company in a time, and the company unfortunately spent it pretty quickly. So they didn't have the kind of mentality Marco was describing earlier of, we don't know what this market's going to do, so we've got to be frugal and careful and plan for a longer time horizon. So I think the VCs who are doing it well have a longer time horizon in mind and a different, it's a slightly different strategy than perhaps what we consider more traditional. I think and then on the other side of that, there are some VCs who are afraid to even make that first investment because they're not sure what to do. And at this point, I think so I've been trying to convince a couple of them actually to make their first investment. And I think this is a great time because the potential is so big. And if we're really thinking about venture as, sort of a high risk, high reward proposition, waiting until it's already established is sort of missing the point to some degree. Like I think making those investments and taking smart risks now could really have a huge payoff when the market does mature. And so, it's anyone's guess at this point. We're all learning as the days and weeks pass. But I'm excited and optimistic about things overall. And I don't think that this happens in every industry as it's getting established. There's going to be some failures. There's going to be some money lost, but that shouldn't be a reason not to keep investing and not to keep, really thinking critically about what that trajectory is ultimately going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of VC dynamics, actually encouraging sign for us has been close to half of our portfolio companies receive follow-on financing, and pretty much in all cases there was a traditional VC in the group. So if you look at the U.S. market, the last year or so, run rate has been around $2 to $3 billion investments in XR. That's about 5% of the U.S. market. The U.S. market is about $60 billion a year in terms of venture investments. So we have a long way to go, and a lot of VCs, as Martina said, they've been sort of following the market. And content side, Silicon Valley tends to be very adverse just because they don't understand content business, and they see gaming as a sort of content, therefore hit-driven business, therefore they can't predict it. Versus, Silicon Valley tends to be a tech investor, so you can see investments related to AR, XR, the glasses and so forth. And then the content side, they'll do it in a short period of time. When there's an inflection point in technology like smartphones, when first came out mobile phones, and they invested in Zynga, Kabam, and so forth, right? And then as soon as markets started, in their mind, saturating or maturing, they got out of the content business and they moved to mobile apps. I think same thing is happening here. For us is really, there's more VC money in the last 12 months than preceding 12 months and even 24 months, which is a very good sign for us.
It sounds like if you're raising in that space, you want to find at least one VC who specializes so you can really get the advice that you need.
A believer. Find a believer.
I would say this is, I'm not trying to be funny, but so sometimes you have to go to two ends of the spectrum. Either go to investors who know nothing about the market but really interested and they're willing to make small bets, learn, or go to the ones that really know a lot about it, right? Mm-hmm. In the middle, you have a lot of false positives. Mm-hmm. They'll take all these meetings, but you're not going to go very far.
Hi, I am Total Game Insight. What do you think about AR, MR categories of apps and products beyond games? Let's say something like Quill or Tilt Brush, like drawing apps, or highly specialized apps, something like in that space.
Nogi, do you want to take this one?
I only can talk about game. And then we actually looking for AR games to invest, but still most of developers showing like just a Pokemon-ish game. And then we are not actually interested in that. And I think it's quite same as, but different game mechanics. But the developer have to just change the way of thinking. Because as you know, AR is always seeing the real world, but it's game. That's why you have to some sort of combine real world, also the gaming mechanics. And for example, like find item something or some subject gonna be totally changed, but still is connected with game. Those kind of element. Also GPS, all kind of things. Because if you see something object change, but your other friend came here before, because game mechanics wise they have a GPS, and then we can see what other user did before. Those kind of things combined. But most of game, as far as I see, just Pokemon-ish, Pokemon Go-ish. That's why. But still, market business standpoint, mobile AR game, it's actually much. I personally think much bigger opportunity compared with Gear VR. Because people say some people who believe mobile VR market, but I don't think everyone play the more set more mobile device in the Gear VR play every day. It's a little hard because they have to get ready for it. Then that's why our personal focus is more like high end. Because high end game is the same as console. People just decide we play game. That's why this is going to play game. But a mobile game is actually people play in their free time, commuting time. Only 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That's why we don't believe putting the mobile in the headset, the play game. Then AR game is a little bit close to the existing mobile situation. In your free time, see other world and then play some game, maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes. That's why those kind of games will feel big potential.
So don't clone. And there's more potential in mobile AR than people might think.
I always say even VR, AR, games should be VR first, AR first. They have to make for AR, for VR. This is very important.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, it does in games. I also highly believe like an AR studio from Facebook and Messenger, like the next platform for 500 million players to experience AR and things like that. But my question was more about non-gaming categories. If any of the funds here are interested in that, if you look beyond just games in your funds and think about apps like Quill or Tilt Brush, something like an AR drawing space or like technological, or you're only got like games focused?
Yeah, we invested in Mindshow. You probably know Mindshow is basically. Going back to your comments about the Tilt Brush and so forth. The great things about them is it's endless. It's like an endless game, Minecraft, right? You can be creating forever, and especially if you have the social aspect, you can share it. You can create and share. That tends to be extremely sticky. If you look at the retention engagement numbers of those apps, they're off the chart compared to everything else. So we look for those opportunities. One of our companies actually isn't in that category. Unfortunately, Stealthy, I can't mention that to you. But Mindshow investment was very much similar to what you're talking about. Endless gameplay, super fun. There's no learning curve. You can create forever and you can share.
Yeah, it kind of becomes a platform of its own because it lasts for years versus a game that just ends in like few days or like few months. So
there's a room for everything, right? It just you really want to provide a choice, and some people really enjoy endless games. And when we were running the studio at PlayFirst, we had our own Minecraft server, and frankly, our productivity went down to 0 for a while, and that was we turned it off. But so that kind of stuff really works, and like Fantastic Contraptions, if you guys know them, it's a very talented team. They have a phenomenally fresh idea to create this endless gameplay. And my only heartburn with them was they weren't raising any venture money, but that really works.
Okay, so how do you value VR companies that have locked-in agreements with like arcades or museums or theaters where they basically have distribution already mapped out, distribution deals, revenue deals locked in? Is that important? Because I assume that the app stores right now, there's not that many devices out there, and that we always deal with app stores from mobile as being sort of an uncertain thing. You never know if the title's going to be a real hit or not. How important it is to have those sort of secondary locked-in markets that basically are, sort of anchor tenants for the titles and stuff.
Nogi, would you like to take that?
So I'm not sure I can tell you the right answer, but so we always do the strategic investment. So we always think about how distribute, how expand their business, and we have many partners. For example, in the Asian countries, we have many location-based and arcade places companies, even our incubation program in Seoul, their partner is actually opened a VR cafe. Those kind of things we're always connecting and then push the portfolio companies' contents. Is that right answers?
So good job on business development. Yeah. Like any secondary distribution channel is always good.
I spent 6 years at this company. It went public in 2000, and big time. And there was someone who remembered me from that, and they basically connected me with this company that's like been distributing 3D stuff to museums for the last 20 years, and they're just rolling out these awesome VR pods, and got the deal. Yeah. So it's cool.
Unlike other gaming sectors, for VR especially, the location-based entertainment is an extremely important component. If you look at the last year revenues of say 400 million, and not including Niantic, software revenues, about 40% came from location-based entertainment.
And I also think it helps. The hardware people love it because it gets people introduced to the VR world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, the biggest challenge for location-based entertainment is the quality of experience.
Right, and with the museums, I will tell you, they're a real pain in the asses, to be honest, because they want everything to be photogrammetry and realistic. They don't want things to look like CGI at all. So we're doing something on plastic pollution. They want you to be flying over the ocean, and you're renting $50,000 cameras and putting them on drones. It's pretty scary.
Yeah. Over the water. Yeah. There was actually one thing I wanted to chime in on. It came to me after we were talking about location, and I think one of the interesting opportunities with VR that I've explored on my company side is the ability to build relationships in VR. So one of the first artists I worked with earlier this year is down in Palo Alto. I was in Seattle, and we didn't have time or resources to be traveling back and forth, so we did all of our collaboration in VR. And I really felt, and we spent a lot of hours, probably above the recommended hours that I had set during that time. But one of the things I realized in that experience was I not only felt like I knew her in the way that you would if you were talking to someone on the phone or a video conference or whatever, we actually had shared memories together. We had inside jokes and memories we would refer to. Oh, remember when we were in Google Earth VR and da-da-da happened, and Chachin dropped his head because he took off his headset, and silly things like that. That really, I felt like I had a very close relationship with her at the end of that in a way that I've never experienced in any other digital medium. And so I think the opportunity there in terms of fundraising, I'm actually taking more and more of my meetings with entrepreneurs in VR when possible. And A, it saves me time. I don't have to get on a plane or a car or whatever. And B, it's a great way to, if they're building in VR, I want to see them in VR. I want to have that, and then see their product and be able to have that interaction in the medium we're talking about. So that's my hope for, when we're talking about, it's clearly the web wasn't the great equalizer in terms of geographic agnosticism that we were hoping it might be. But I think VR could be in the long term. We're not there yet, but I think it could be a place where we could really start to see location matter a little bit less.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming and talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you.